let's say if I'm head of HR at somewhere, you know how many messages I might get about someone wanting a job? Like it's gonna be that one person that I always see that's gonna stick out. Like I keep seeing this person. Let me reply. Because if I don't, that person is gonna continue to hit me, keep hitting me back. So let me reply.
Tune in as we give flowers to Black men and women making waves in the audio industry. I'm your host, Sidney Evans, and this is Beyond the Threshold. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Beyond the Threshold. I'm your host, Sidney Evans, an award-winning audio editor, mixer, and producer. For those of you who don't know, on this show, I interview Black men and women working in the audio industry to highlight the lessons and experiences it takes to achieve success in the field. We got another amazing episode in store for today, and I will introduce today's guest shortly. But before I do, I just wanted to take the time to say thank you to anyone who has listened to the show so far. I appreciate your support, and I hope you continue to support as we continue to grow the platform. All right, so today's guest is actually someone that I did not know prior to the interview, but he was introduced to me by Dante Hodge, who I had on a previous episode of the podcast. So immediately I reached out to him, and because of the relationship that he and Dante has, we made it happen pretty quickly, and he was happy to come on. So to give a little bit of a background on him, he is a Howard University alum, originally from East Orange, New Jersey, now living in the Atlanta area. He has over 2 decades of media and audio production experience, ranging from DJing, studio engineering, audiobook recording and editing, radio producing, and podcast producing and editing. He's the current podcast producer at Urban One Podcast Network. So I'd like to introduce our guest for today, Jahi Whitehead. Welcome to the show, brother.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it, Sidney. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be here, man.
Yes, sir. I'm glad we were able to make it happen so quickly. So we're going to jump right into things, man. Could you share a little bit about your background and what were some of the experiences that led up to you discovering your passion for audio production? And then we're going to get into the nitty gritty.
So I would say that probably started with the movie Juice. Are you familiar with Juice?
I am.
Okay, cool. So that's probably where, like, I believe it probably all started. I was a big fan of that movie, and particularly I wanted to DJ. So if you watch that movie, the whole DJ battle, that sparked my interest in wanting to be a DJ. A little known fact, I don't want to say little known fact, but the thing about me, when I was growing up, I was a singer. So that was the other thing that always got me pretty much involved into like music, art, studios, all that stuff like that. So fast forward till I got to the age of 13, I bought my first set of turntables. So from there, I started buying little equipment and building like this makeshift studio at my father's house, which I had no idea what I was doing. I promise you, like zero. Like I had no idea as far as like really doing it. Like I had this 8-track tape recorder that we used to record stuff on. This is before we had a lot of digital stuff, before we had a lot of that out. Probably dating myself by saying all these things, but it was around that time. So after that, started actually recording with local groups around the city, one group. So I actually got into like, I won't say like it wasn't a real studio either. It was still someone's basement, but they had Pro Tools. Started seeing that, then stopped messing with them for a little bit, and then got along with this other group, and we actually signed a deal. It did end up not working out, but we was working with some people. But in the process of that, we finally got into like a studio. So working with big boys, the SSL, and finally working on Pro Tools. I remember there was this bass player who was also the engineer. He was the one that really tried to teach me about like engineering and plugins. Like the first one that initial started teaching me. Then I started working with my boy, who had the producer of the group, Tyree, and he got this program called Cubase, and we started recording at his house. And I started learning how to do that, and I began to start running the sessions because I had a knack for audio just because of my DJ stuff. So I was also DJing around. So still had a knack for audio. I ended up buying an MPC 2000, like right after him. Working on that, started doing production. Fast forward, going to school, started DJing at Howard, started working at the radio station. And while doing that, I think that's when I realized that I can take this audio production thing, or just audio in general, and actually be a professional outside of just making music or just DJing. Like I can use this as a career path if I wanted to.
Let me pause you real quick because I got a question. So, did you actually study media production? Were you at Howard, or was your major in something else?
So my initial major, well, I was initially went in there undecided. So then I switched to I was going into music business. It was more so music business along the lines of being a performer and being able to manage yourself as a performer, not necessarily the business of the music business. So it was a little bit different than what I was trying to do at the time. More along the lines of what I was trying to do was more in the communication and media. So my degree is actually in more so broadcast media production. So I did get a lot of hands-on training with Pro Tool, even Final Cut, writing in general, script writing, broadcast performance, learning how to actually speak. Public speaking was definitely a class that we had to take.
Okay, so first off, let me say, when I was in college and I found out I had to take public speaking, I literally considered changing my major because I don't know what I thought, but I didn't think taking public speaking was going to be a part of that process. So let me just say that first. And second, I hated taking the writing classes when I was in college, but now looking back on it, I'm glad that I did take them, and I kind of wish I would have put more into it. But in knowing what I know now, the writing part was probably the most important out of all the classes I took. So for those of you who are maybe in college or you're early in your career, or maybe even if you're later in your career and you don't think your writing chops are up to par, I would recommend you take some courses, do whatever you got to do to increase that skill, because if you can write well, you'll be more valuable than most of the people working in the industry, especially those who can't write.
1000%. Me being able to write or learning how to just script writing classes or learning how to write just various things, scripts for advertisers, those things have helped me, taken me further than some of my peers in same situations, just because I have that skill to be able to write along with producing. Writing is super important. It's super, super important. So yeah.
All right, so you end up at Howard. You touched on your major and some of the courses that you took, but we all know the most important thing are the activities that you involve yourself in. So, what were some of the things that you got involved in at Howard, and how did that help you moving forward in your career?
Oh man, it was great because see, here at Howard we have WHBC, which is our college radio station, but we also have WHUR, which is our terrestrial radio station, which is like our bigger station, which is our commercial radio station. Steve Harvey's on there and stuff like that. So they do big numbers, right? So, but those are our counterpart. We would have to go and like pretty much intern with them. So when I was the music director at WHBC, I would have to go intern with the music director at WHUR. Vice versa, same thing with the program director. When I was program director at WHBC, I had to go intern at the program director at WHUR. So at the same time, and us interning there, when this is only for the managers for primarily, but us interning there, it wasn't a situation where we're just doing like grunt work and they just want us to do stuff. We're really learning how to run the radio station in those particular jobs. So when it comes to scheduling music for an entire radio station, I have done that already. before I was 20. I was able to have a leg up on a lot of people, which honestly didn't bear fruit till later on. I thought that would help me out right when I graduate, right out the gate, and it didn't necessarily work that way for me. So I had to use, like, after graduation, I used other there were other means to, to financially support myself. I did definitely took other jobs outside of audio, but one things I did, started engineering at a studio in Maryland while I was finishing my last semester, and that taught me more about just the music side of, like, the engineering. Because before, we at Howard and at school, we were doing more media production and broadcasting and stuff like that. While I'm engineering, it's more music side, little more emphasis on the music, even though I've done it before. Now I'm strictly an engineer. I'm here to mix, master, record, mix and master, all your stuff like that. So, and now helping putting, like, records together too, because it was like an A&R position as well. And it was good. It taught me a lot. It was fun. I was able to didn't make a lot of money. Um going into doing this. That's the one thing I would teach anybody or tell anybody that's in the audio space and in this media space. Learn how to use your skills to find other ways to make money. Go back to how I met Dante. The reason why I got into audiobooks in the first place is because out of college, while I was still looking for certain things, I got a job at Audible in New Jersey, with their main headquarters is in New Jersey, North New Jersey, not too far from where I'm from. And I worked there for about 2 years. Once that contract ended, I moved. That's when I moved to Atlanta. So one of the first things when I got here, when I couldn't find work, like I thought I would be able to find, was I couldn't really find work. One of the first things I saw was an audiobook engineer position. I was like, audiobooks, okay, cool. I did audiobooks before. I'm familiar. I worked on this. Cool. Let me do that. And that's how I was able to survive until I was able to find some steady work. So yeah, so that's how I inevitably got into that.
Cool. So you're in Atlanta, you got the audiobook gig that's providing some decent work for you. So did things take off immediately afterwards, or was there still like a waiting or a transition period to where you could find something more full time and more stable?
Yeah, I was working there for about, like I said, I worked there for about 3 years. But in the process of working there, I believe after the first year and a half or so, I started working in radio part time and sports radio, which initially I was trying to get to. If you're familiar with Atlanta, initially, I'm not even gonna lie about this. Now I could say this if my ex boss ever hears this, Sean. Initially, I was trying to get to V103, which is the hip hop station out there, one of the bigger hip hop stations out in Atlanta. Um, a friend of mine from college knew someone at 92.9 The Game. So fast forward, that's when I was at. So I went to 92.9 The Game. Their radio station is literally the floor above V103. So I thought eventually I'd go down there, but I got into that 92.9 The Game because at the end of the day, rather I did all this music stuff, audio stuff through high school and all that. I also did sports. Like I played football, I wrestled, I ran track. So yeah, so I was like a sports head too. So it wasn't necessarily a hard thing to adjust to all of that. Radio is radio. Once you learn how to you can produce. So the radio aspect of it was not the hard part. It was actually getting my bones together and, like, producing, putting together a whole radio show talking about sports. Because when you're in sports radio and your sports talk radio in particular, like, for that hour block, or you got a show for 4 hours, you're talking predominantly for those 4 hours, like, or someone's talking for those 4 hours. So you got to make sure that we got enough stuff to talk about within those 4 hours. So putting that show together. So that's where I got my skills at there a little bit better. Even with the writing stuff, that I was starting to write better there. Working with that, and that was able to go. I was the executive network producer for the Hawks and the Falcons, so I did all their football and basketball games. I had my own show on the weekends with Sam and Greg. Shout out to those guys, love them. Even still working another job, so I'm still probably engineering for someone else, like doing audio editing. I was working with this company, which I'm not going to say their names. They don't need to say their names, but pretty much it was a company that did Siri. There's the initial company that recorded Siri, editing that stuff, right? So I saw the landscape of radio while I was in radio, and I saw that I should probably leave radio. But the natural progression, if you're doing talk radio, obviously it's podcasting, right? So, and quite frankly, while we're there at 929 Game, we're producing podcasts as well, like on the side, like for our digital website. So even while there, we're still working on podcasting. And this is one thing I'll tell people, and because of radio, because of the people that I've met, I was able to parlay that and to network with other people and able to get jobs a little quick, easier after that. After that, I was recommended for a job at Georgia Public Broadcasting to edit podcasts. Now it's like, all right, so we're really putting these audio documentaries together for the most part. Even though it's for an interview, it's still like a audio documentary. And now I'm really learning this like podcasting world, not just this free form. We're just talking and we're just recording something. Now I'm getting a full landscape of how to really put together a podcast and all those things. And from there, just got better and got better at it.
Real quick, I want to dive into the radio and podcasting thing, especially the differences between the two. So obviously they're different mediums, but the skill set is somewhat of an overlap. But can you really pinpoint, based on your experience, the differences between working in radio and then transitioning into the podcast industry?
Okay, so the thing about radio, when you do local radio, your topics are generally localized. So you're going to do topics based on pretty much where you're at. When it comes to podcasting, you got a little bit more freedom to talk about a wider range of topics. And you can expand a little bit more on particular topics. You don't have to worry about going to commercial break. There's nothing to hurry up here. We can talk. We can flesh this topic completely out till there's no more to talk about, and then we can move on to the next thing. I think sometimes in radio, regardless of what format you have, there are times when you're talking about a topic and you cannot completely talk about it the way that you want to because you have the restrictions of the commercials, you have restrictions of FCC, you have a lot of different restrictions that you have to go through. The only restrictions that you have in podcasting are the restrictions that you put on yourself. So the restrictions that you put on your show, the restrictions that you put on your network, so those are the restrictions that you have. So once you abide by those things, you have a free range to do as much as you want as far as a particular topic, a particular subject, or whatever the case may be, and you have your niche audience that is going to like you. Because with terrestrial radio, that's always on. They're going to be on regardless. So I can just, if I'm in my car, and people say radio is dying, which it is, but radio is still listened to a whole heck of a lot. So if you go into your car and just push something, it's just always there. I'm not searching for that necessarily. When it comes to podcasting, I have to search that out. That is something that I've become a fan of now. Like it doesn't just pass my day. Now I have to search out for that. There's a little bit more community built in the podcasting world than in radio.
That makes a lot of sense. And surprisingly, I never actually thought of it that way. So I'm glad you pointed that out. But I wanted to back up a little bit and touch on something that you said as far as building relationships, or highlighted as far as building relationships or networking, depending on what you want to call it. But I call them two different things because I feel like networking is more of the go to an event with the intent of meeting a lot of people, have your business cards ready, being ready to shake hands, give your spiel about what you do and how you can help people. And then there's the relationship building part of it, where it's kind of more organic. Like you have jobs, you connect with people. For those that are for you, y'all build relationships and you stay in touch and continue to nurture those relationships. Or it could just be you going to a social event and by happenstance, you kind of hit it off with somebody and you start a relationship or building a relationship that way. So what is your approach to, whether you want to use the term networking or building relationships, and which approach has been more helpful for you?
Hmm. I will say sometimes just going out, handing out business cards, like depending on. And now, when you go and do that, if you go into network and you go and hand out business cards and stuff like that, I think you have to be going somewhere where that's the goal. Like if you're going to like a summit or a conference or something like that, that's the goal at some of those places, right? So when you're going there, you're actually going there to network. People are coming there knowing that you're going to network with them. And the ones that are going to stand out, they are going to take interest in. There have been good experiences with that. There have been bad experiences with that. Everything is not the same. But what I will say, my networking came from a lot of that came from work. Well, like when I said when I was at 92.9 The Game, they got me to Georgia Public Broadcasting. That was literally the person that I worked with on a show. We would talk. We were having conversations. We went to a baseball game, and I was telling them some things that I wanted to do as far as podcasting and things like that. Next thing I know is, hey, give this person a call. There's a job open for podcasting. I told them about you. They're interested. Simple as that. 2 days later, I got the job. No real big interview, no nothing. 2 days later, simple as that, I got the job. Part of networking is you actually going out working, and one of it is being persistent. Like if even with job at the radio station, my first job in a radio station after college, that I had to be persistent with that. I had to keep call like, hey, it took me about a few months to get to for that to happen. You do have to be persistent to the point where you're almost to the point where they are tired of you. So they're like, you know what? I'm tired of this person just hitting me up. Let me do something about this. Be respectful, but be persistent. If you got to DM someone, if you got to go on their LinkedIn page, be respectful, but be persistent. Like, let's say if I'm head of HR at somewhere, you know how many messages I might get on LinkedIn or whatever the case may be about head of HR or about someone wanting a job. Like it's going to be that one person that I always see that's going to stick out. Like I keep seeing this person. Let me reply. Let me eventually reply, because if I don't, that person is going to continue to hit me, keep hitting me back. So let me reply. That is something that's really important in networking. Doing good work. I can't stress that enough. Doing good work, because if the host of my show can't vouch that I do a good job, he's not going to. You know what I'm saying? He's not going to put his neck out there for someone that's not like that. You know what I mean? Your work has to speak for itself. And I'm gonna answer your question even before we even get to there. This is part of Urban One, because it's the same situation that happened. I never had a job interview with them, the official job interview. I started working with them mainly because I got laid off at a as a podcast producer for another company whose name I won't mention. But I got laid off there, and while I'm getting laid off, one of the people that worked there, one of my coworkers, called me up and said, "Hey, heard you just got laid off. I'm starting somewhere new soon. I'm about to give them my 2 weeks notice anyway. I'm starting somewhere new. I think you'll be a good fit there." And that was Urban One.
So the most important thing to me that stood out about what you just said is letting the work take care of itself, because essentially it's the only thing you can really control. No matter what career field you're in, you have to deal with things like politics and unfortunate circumstances, as you know, maybe you're getting laid off or flat out fired, or you're going through an interview process and you get far along in the process but you don't ultimately end up getting hired, and you start kind of stressing out about and reflecting on why things happen and didn't happen. And a lot of this stuff is timing, man. Like you might have the skill set, you might be the perfect candidate, but things may not work out for you. But you can't control those things. But if you spend as much time and effort as you can and just perfecting the craft and letting the good work that you do speak for itself, I honestly feel that you'll end up where you're supposed to end up, and things will actually end up working out for you in the long run.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly, because I'm telling you, that situation was just like that. I was like, man, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm getting laid off. Like it was so crazy. Like I got laid off on a Wednesday. And the next day they were like, someone told me, it's like, hey, you should go to this. Like they gave me a free tickets to this concert. I was like, hey, you can go. I was like, I shouldn't go. But I'm like, nah, I'm gonna go because it was my favorite. It was Nas. It was Nas and Wu Tang. I'm a big Nas fan. So I was like, I'm gonna go. The next day, literally while I'm at the concert, I get a text like, hey, this is blah 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 from Urban One. I want to talk to you tomorrow. Talk to them tomorrow. Started freelancing literally within the next week. A couple of months from there, they said we want to hire you full time. That process right there, like it literally was just, it's one of them things that, again, that was something that was out of my control. But again, it was networking and just being a good person. Half of that, like that's the other half of networking. Just being a good person. Like no one wants to work with someone that's just not a good person. Like that you don't like to work with, that you're not cool with, you don't mesh with, you don't work well with. Like have a good attitude. Like it's okay to be a good person. You don't have to try to snake everybody. You try to snake everyone to get ahead. It's not important. Be a good person.
I 100% agree because people focus so much on climbing the ladder, progressing their career, that they ignore all the people that they encountered along the way and the way that they actually treated those people that they did encounter. You never know how that may come full circle. And when it does come full circle, you actually want it to benefit you and not hurt you or hinder your chances of achieving success. And at the end of the day, just scrap all the, you did this for me because I was good to you stuff. It's just the right thing to do, man. Like you can have a peace of mind and you'll be able to sleep at night because you know that you did things the right way and you treated people the right way. Okay, so moving things along. You're at Urban One now. Really just, well, first of all, how long have you been working there? And then what is some of the stuff that you're proud that you worked on? And could you highlight the things that y'all are currently working on or producing that people can look forward to?
Absolutely. So I've been at Urban One as the podcast producer for our network for a year. It's been a little bit over a year, but been a year doing that. Like I said, I was working there previously freelancing, but as their main sole producer actually. It's been a year. Some stuff I worked on. There was a podcast, that the initial podcast that I worked on when I first got there, which was the Undressing Room with L'Oreal and Claudia Jordan. We did great numbers for that. Once that ended, moved on to something else. But before that, even that, we go back to what you were saying about radio shows and turn those into podcasts. We made plans to turn a lot of our shows, a lot of our assets that we already had into podcasts, which is Ricky Smiley, DL Hughley, The Morning Hustle, Get Up Mornings with Erica Campbell, Amanda Seals. So I manage all of those. Ricky Smile, we're well over 1 million downloads before our first year doing that. Also, work with our TV One stuff, do Fatal Attraction. Also worked on Black Health 365 was one another podcast that I worked on while I was there. Not doing that anymore. That was one. Maria Moore's Mind, Body, and Business. I was working on it, producing for that for a while. Right now, I created a show, co-created with our leader there, called She Said It First, with Lene Monet and Indescribable, aka Geraldine Lake. Hello, ladies. I'm a executive producer for that, and that's going well. We're going in our second or third month. We're going into our third month actually at this point, and we've been doing really good within the first few weeks. We already hit the top 200 like 3 times in the comedy podcast. That podcast is doing great, and we just trying to develop some new podcasts over there. We already bought well, this not part of me, but we have the Fun House with Kid and Play over there. We just did Dear Future Wifey with Terrence Whitfield. We're bringing some other podcasts along. We're creating some new original programming. Trying to do that in a short run, in the long run coming soon. So yeah, just trying to build that up to one of the preeminent podcast networks, Black owned, Black ran. Within our first year, we're already I don't know if we still are, but we already were in the top 20 of podcast networks. So we are growing pretty fast and pretty quickly. Doing a lot of hard work. It's a small team that we have, but it's a great team that we have. We're able to build and we're able to, try to put out our stories and trying to tell our stories the way that we need to tell them.
Super dope, man. I'm glad that you all have incorporated podcasting and especially the podcast network into your content. Kind of just made sense with already having that name in radio and kind of repurposing the radio shows and creating the original stuff as well. So glad to hear that. So that kind of takes me into my next question. Obviously, Urban One is well known and there's a lot of talent out there, a lot of people trying to get their foot in the door. So what would be your advice for, up and coming talent that wants to break into the industry? What are some of the things that you look for and some of the skill sets that can separate them from their peers?
The first thing I would say, hone your craft. Like, so whatever you do, whatever you're good at, whether you're an audio engineer, whether you are a producer, meaning like just because you're a producer doesn't mean you're an audio engineer, which is something else I'm gonna say too. But hone your craft, be the best, get your 10,000 hours in there with that. That's the first thing. Now, the second thing is don't be one dimensional. Be able to do other things. So if you are an audio editor, learn how to produce. If you are a producer for a show, learn how to audio edit. If you don't know how to write, learn how to write. If you're bad at researching, research a little bit more. If you're good at booking guests, start booking guests. Like, be able to do everything. Be able to be a one-man show to where that they can't fire you. Like, they can't get rid of you. Or if they get rid of you, you'll be fine because you can do something else. You can find another job easily because of your skill set. If you're working, and this is with anything, and this is with any job market right now, especially in this climate of what we do as far as media production, audio production, anything like that. If you can only do one thing, you're not that useful. You have to be able to do multiple things to be useful, because I can get a college kid to do one thing. I can find someone to do one thing and I don't have to pay them that much. You have to learn your value. Biggest thing, when you learn your value, you have to know what you're good at and what you can do. When you learn your value as far as what your capabilities are, then you can take that a lot further. All those things, those are the things that we are looking for, or any company's looking for right now, because I don't have the time. Not just me, and I'm saying I, as far as if I'm a company, I don't have the time, I have the bandwidth to sit there and teach or train anyone to do certain things like that you should be able to do. Obviously, at the beginning, we can do that, but all the time we can't do that. And then you're gonna have to be able to do more, because a lot of these companies are doing a lot more with a lot less, or trying to do a lot more with a lot less. Urban One Podcast Network, we have a small team. That's because everybody on our team could do almost everything. It's a team of 5. So because this small team can do multiple things, that's why we can grow at the rate that we're able to grow. And people have a lot larger teams than we have, and they can't do what we do. Learn as much as you can and be indispensable.
Thank you for sharing that, man. For all those up and comers, hopefully you take heed to that bit of advice. All right, so we are getting close to the end of the show, so kind of want to wrap things up on a much more fun note, not so heavy. And I think you're particularly enjoyed this portion of the show based on your experience in the music industry. So I got a few questions, and the first one is your favorite piece of equipment that you've had.
I had a Phantom G6 keyboard. That was my favorite thing that I ever had. Like, I love that thing. I used to love that thing. But outside of that, I would just say Pro Tools.
So I'm not a musician, so I'm not too familiar with all that type of stuff, but I'm gonna assume the Phantom G6 is a keyboard or piano or something of that nature. And obviously Pro Tools is the industry standard, starting off in music and now into other industries as well. So obviously that makes a lot of sense. All right, so next question. Favorite album of all time?
I'm gonna do Prince and the Revolution, Purple Rain. I'm gonna do Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life, and I'm gonna go with Michael Jackson, Off the Wall.
So obviously just went with the cheat codes by mentioning Prince, Stevie Wonder, and Michael Jackson. Your taste is your taste, but they are kind of the cheat codes, but obviously solid choices. All right, next one. Favorite music producer.
See, now you just did that. So I'm gonna go with Quincy.
Okay, so I see what you did there as well, because we mentioned, being multi talented, and obviously he's a great music producer in a traditional sense, but he's done music scores. He produced Fresh Prince of Bel Air from the TV side, and then he also did the infamous Sanford and Son theme song. So Quincy Jones, say no more. All right, next, favorite film score.
All right, so this is gonna be interesting. The Prince of Egypt.
Yeah, not too familiar with that one, but who did that one, by the way?
I don't know who did the score. I forgot who did the score. I have to go back and look at it. But was it Hans Zimmer?
Yep, Hans Zimmer. Just looked it up.
Hans Zimmer is my favorite. But yeah, that Prince of Egypt is my favorite.
All right, cool. I'm gonna have to confirm that on my own time. Next, favorite TV theme song.
That's actually easy, and and no one probably say this, but Taxi, the theme song of Taxi. You go back and listen to the theme song of Taxi.
I don't think I remember that one.
It's no words. It's no words to it. Go listen to the theme song of Taxi. One of the hardest theme songs. Like, man, right now, I would want to sample it. That's how good it is. It's one of them.
Okay, cool, man. But yeah, I think that's it. We had a great conversation, man. Definitely appreciate you sharing all your experiences and giving helpful tips and bits of information that people can walk away with and implement on their journey into achieving audio success. So appreciate you coming on the show, man. And yeah, I enjoyed it.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you having me. And it goes back to what we said before about networking. You said a name. You said Dante. So I mean, once you say that, you like that's a person that I work with. That's a person I know that's legit. So once you say a name that I know that's legit, I'm gonna have to. And he gave you my name, so that means that he values something that's legit there. So I would have to. That's a no brainer.
Definitely, definitely. Well, yeah, that's a wrap for today's episode. And for everybody out there, thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us on today's episode. Please don't forget to subscribe to the show and leave us a review. If you'd like to work with me or connect, please go to soundbysit.com and schedule a call. There you can also check out the full list of productions I've worked on. If you'd like to connect on social media, my handle is soundbysit.com on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm Sidney Evans on LinkedIn. Don't forget to follow Beyond the Threshold on Instagram as well. I'll catch you on the next episode.